A group of college students, during field research, stumble upon something extraordinary. They were on the coast of a quiet little town in New England, studying the historic architecture of a century-old lighthouse. What began as a routine academic project quickly turns into a treasure hunt, a search for answers that leads them to question everything they knew about reality. In the dusty basements of the lighthouse, they find old diaries and notebooks written by the lighthouse's first keeper. At first glance, the records seem to be just notes about daily life, storms, repairs, and the monotonous routine of life in an isolated lighthouse. But upon closer reading, they notice a strange repetition. The keeper describes light patterns that do not fit any known navigation code. Every few nights, he would activate complex sequences, with pauses and repetitions that seem to have their own logic. The students notice that these light sequences are always activated on clear nights, when the stars are most visible. They are different from SOS signals or any other standard form of maritime communication. The young people begin to connect the dots and search for these same patterns in other historical records of lighthouses on the same coast. What they find is even more surprising. They discover that several historic lighthouses share these same patterns of mysterious lights. There seemed to be a secret network, a silent communication operating in the shadows of our knowledge. For most, lighthouses are a symbol of hope, of salvation for those lost at sea. But for the students, the story begins to unfold in a much more frightening way. The keeper's notes, translated with the help of a linguistics professor, reveal a truth that challenges our perception. The light signals were not sent to this world, but to other dimensions, to other realities. The decoding work is complex. The sequences of light and shadow do not seem to follow human logic. It is not Morse code, nor is it any known code. It is a totally new language. The students turn to a professor of theoretical physics, an expert in unusual phenomena, who, although skeptical at first, is intrigued by the precision and repetition of the patterns. He suggests that the key to deciphering the language may lie in nature itself. They realize that the signals are sent in sync with specific astronomical events, such as eclipses or the appearance of comets. This suggests that the communication is not random, but rather a celestial calendar, a kind of cosmic agenda that Earth shares with other worlds. The physics professor helps them create a mathematical model that translates the sequences of lights into coordinates of time and space. With each pattern deciphered, they obtain a new coordinate, a new point in the universe. The lighthouse keeper's notes, which previously seemed random, now reveal themselves to be a map. They see that the small town's lighthouse is not the only one. There is a network of lighthouses, each operating at a different frequency and time, but all converging for the same purpose, to warn. The students decipher the lighthouse keeper's notes, which describe the meaning of each pattern. One of the simplest codes, for example, translates as presence confirmed. Another, more complex, is the awakening. The keeper's narrative reveals that the purpose of the lighthouses is to alert other realities to the existence of Earth and the advancement of humanity, which would be the awakening. The story gets complicated when they find a recurring pattern in the keeper's notes, which he describes as the Great Calm. This sign has nothing to do with peace or tranquility. On the contrary, it is linked to a period when interdimensional communication decreases dramatically, an eerie silence that coincides with moments of great crisis in human history, such as world wars and natural disasters. The big question that hangs in the air is, why does communication cease in times of crisis? The students theorize that other realities are not ignoring us, but rather protecting themselves, disconnecting to avoid the risk of contamination. In search of answers as to why other worlds fall silent during humanity's crises, the Guardian, in his notes, describes an encounter. He recounts an experience in which the light from the lighthouse, instead of projecting outward, seemed to bend inward, creating a kind of portal. Through this portal, he says he saw something. In one of the excerpts, the Guardian describes an encounter with an entity. It had no definite physical form, but communicated with him telepathically. The creature does not identify itself, but conveys a warning message. The message is that humanity, with its rapid advancement and constant wars, poses a danger to the interdimensional balance. The Guardian, in his notes, begins to describe humanity as a reality with a manufacturing defect. He states that our tendency towards self-destruction, our greed, and our violence are seen by other realities as a contagious disease. The lighthouse, then, would not only be a sign of presence, but a warning of danger, alerting other worlds to our existence. The Guardian, in his notes, says he made a pact with the entity. He commits to using the light from the lighthouse to filter the signals. Instead of emitting constant signals, he begins to send codes that warn about our behavior, our advances, and our crises. In return, other realities do not intervene, maintaining a prudent silence. The students are confronted with the idea that Earth is seen as a kind of quarantine. The lighthouse was not serving as a guide. It was a warning siren. The light was not an invitation for contact, but rather a warning for others to stay safe. The revelation changes the young people's perception of human history. The events they studied in history books, the wars, plagues, and disasters, take on a new and dark meaning. The students discover that, after the first Guardian, communication with other realities was interrupted, on orders from a higher command. Records show that the lighthouses of the silent network were deactivated, one by one. The Guardian's diaries reveal a final act of desperation. Foreseeing the end of his mission, he hid one last message, not in light codes, but in a form he thought humans of the future might be able to decipher. Where could this message be? Based on the Guardian's notes, the students theorized that the last message was hidden in the lighthouse itself, somewhere most people would never look. The search for the hidden message becomes a race against time. The group of students, along with their physics and linguistics professor, spend days in the lighthouse, searching every corner, every crack, every stone. They use the coordinates and clues left by the keeper to find the exact spot. Under a rock, they find a small metal box. Inside it, there's a recording and a note. The note, written in a language they do not know, is translated by the linguistics professor. The message is short and direct. Do not lose hope. The cure is within you. The recording, in turn, is an audio message from the Guardian. He narrates his last message in a melancholic tone. The sound of his voice, coming from the past, is as if he were there, in the same room with the students. In the recording, the Guardian says that, despite everything, he believes in humanity. He says that the manufacturing defect can be fixed, that our violence is not our essence, but a deviation from the path. He ends the recording with an appeal. He asks young people not to despair with their discovery. He encourages them to use this truth to alert humanity, to show that we can change. The young people, with the audio and the note in hand, wonder how to use this truth to alert humanity. They know that such a revelation, coming from a lighthouse, would be treated as madness. They then decide that the only way to get the message across is through art, in a subtle way that reaches people without sounding alarmist. The group of young people, using the light codes, the Guardian's recording, and the diaries, decide to create an art installation. A replica of the lighthouse, using LED lamps, emits the exact sequences of lights described in the diaries. The installation would be exhibited in a museum. They create a video that tells the story of the lighthouse, the Guardian, and the signals, like a documentary. The idea is that art serves as a means to the truth. The installation is a success. Thousands of people visit the museum to see the replica of the lighthouse. The video, narrating the story, attracts the attention of academics and scientists. Most see the work as a beautiful metaphor about humanity. However, a group of scientists working in quantum physics and astronomy become deeply interested in the light sequences. They realize that the codes, if translated, point to the location of a star in a distant solar system. In a dramatic twist, these scientists, using advanced telescopes, decide to investigate the location. And what they find is unexpected. The star, which they thought was a distant celestial body, is not a star. It is a wormhole, an interdimensional portal. And at the exact point where the light from the beacon points, there's a message in light code. The code translates as, "We are watching." The project is still active,